Okay, so this video, we're actually going to go through the entire 3.6 lesson in this video because it's so short. Or at least it's very simple, yeah. We're kind of taking a break in this very last lesson from proofs, right? Our last two lessons are about proofs, and going back to talking about just properties of triangles. In particular, we're going to be focusing on isosceles triangles, which again mean that we have two sides congruent, right? That's isosceles triangles. What we have talked about before is that if you've got two sides congruent in an isosceles triangle, that guarantees two angles will be congruent, and vice versa. Yeah, two angles congruent, two sides back and forth. So that's what they call the base angles theorem, is that if you're looking at your notes here on 3.6, if I've got two sides congruent, then what we call the base angles are congruent. And the base angles are the ones that touch the bottoms of each of those sides. So these are what we call base angles, yeah? Even if we turn the figure, right, if I like rotated this or flipped it sideways, those would still be considered the base angles. So don't get confused. If the triangle is flipped, you want to identify the two congruent sides and then see the bottom of those are the base angles. So same thing here. If I know that I have these two angles congruent, the two sides that touch those, 1, 2, those are going to be congruent as well. So that's all we're talking about in this lesson. I want to double check one thing really quickly here. Does this pop up? Doesn't not. Yes. One last fact, and we've already talked this as well. If a triangle is equiangular, then it is equilateral and vice versa. If I know all three angles the same, guaranteed all three sides are going to be the same as well, and vice versa. So that's all we're talking through. These are going to go pretty quick. I'm going to kind of say one or two things. You're going to try it and come back and check as we go through these problems. So first example here, it says find the unknown measure. So what you have to notice about this picture is that this is an isosceles triangle, right? Two sides the same. So we're going to use the fact that in an isosceles triangle, if I have two sides the same, two angles will be the same. So we have to know what is the angle that's going to be the same. We need to find x and y. And so far I've got 50. This is one of my base angles. Again, the base angles are down there at the bottom of the triangle. I got my two sides congruent. Those are the base angles. So is x or y going to also be 50? Which one is the other base angle? X. X is the other base angle, and so that means that x is also 50. Right, again, these are what we consider to be the base angles. Here's my congruent sides. Here is my congruent angles. So the next thing we do from there is how do we find y? Well, if I know that, I'm going to erase all this stuff here because I wrote a lot. If I know that this is 50 and this is 50, we can use the fact that all triangles, all three angles add up to what? They add up to 180, right? All three angles add up to 180. I got 50, I got 50, I got y. Figure out what y needs to be so that all three add up to 180. Go ahead and try it. Okay, well, so far, we've done this so many times, guys. Hopefully we hadn't had an issue with it. I've got 100 so far. I need to have 180 total. So that means that y has to be 80. And that's it, right? So again, we used two facts here. We used the fact that these were going to be congruent because those are the base angles. And then once we knew that, we were able to find y. Let's go ahead and try another one. Okay, so this one is a little bit different. Notice now that they're telling us we have two angles marked congruent, which guarantees certain sides are going to be congruent. So we have to be able to identify the sides that are going to be congruent. And again, it's the ones, if those are my base angles, it's the two sides coming off of those angles. So this side is going to be congruent to this side. Again, if here's my base angles, it's the ones coming off of them separately. I know, like, obviously this side comes off of those angles, but it touches both of them. So the side that touches one angle and the side that touches the other, these are going to be congruent. If these angles are congruent, these sides are congruent. So very easily then, what does that make x? Well, if it's congruent to the other side, that makes x also 5 centimeters, yeah? That's it, right? Pretty simple concept. Again, if I know I have two angles the same, those two sides will be the same. I don't know what this side is. I can't know that actually, but we can find this side at least. Okay, so I want you guys to try this one. Again, what you're noticing here, you have to notice that we've got two sides the same. You need to find x, you need to find y. So you need to think, okay, if I have two sides the same, I have two angles the same. Which angle is going to be the same as 46, if any? And then we can find y from there. Okay, well, x is going to be 46 as well because these are also base angles. You should have used the fact that so far in this triangle, we've got, let's see, that's 12, that's 9. We've got 92 degrees so far. Minusing that from 180, I can probably do this math, but let me, a little lazy here. 180 minus 92, we got 88. So there is y. Again, these are the same because these are the base angles. We use what's left over to get y. Let's try another one. Ooh, okay, this one's a little bit trickier. So what I want you to do here is, again, realize that if we have two sides congruent, we have two angles congruent. Identify in this picture our base angles. Which of these angles are going to be the same? Well, these are our base angles. Again, here's my sides. There's one base angle. There's the other base angle. That's how that works, right? Off of the sides, boom, that are congruent, there's our base angles. So I can't say that x is 40. I can't say y is 40 because these are the ones that are the same. This one is not the same, is it? Right? So we're going to have to use a different fact here. So let's kind of think this through. I do know these are going to be the same. And I do know that I'm using 40 so far. So let's see what we have left over in our triangle to split between those two angles. All three angles in a triangle add to 180, right? I'm using up 40 so far. What does this leave me with? 140. Now, again, what I know is that x and y are going to be equal. What that means is they have to split the 140 evenly between them. So if I'm splitting 140 between them, what does that make x and y? Well, if I divide by 2, I get 70 for each of them. 70 and 70. So be very careful, guys, when you're doing this assignment. If you're given the base angle, like we were in this very first one, we're like, ooh, this is a base angle, so this one's also 50. And then we went from there. If you're not given the base angle, you have to think about it like this. Think, okay, I'm using this much so far. What's left over to split between those two angles? Let me see. Do I want to keep doing? Yeah, we'll do these last two. Okay, so these are going to be very simple equations that we're going to be working with here. We're going to have to set up an equation because I've got x plus 13. We know we need to solve for x. So thinking again, what we need to know in order to set up our equation. Notice here, this is very important. I've got two congruent angles. That means two sides are congruent. What are the two sides that are going to be congruent because of those angles? Well, it's going to be these two. Again, the ones that touch, right, come up off those angles. These are congruent. So because they're congruent, what can we do for our equation? We can set them equal to each other. Very simple, very easy to do. These are going to be congruent. So let's just subtract 13 over. We'll do this kind of quick. We got x equals 111. And boom, that's it. Again, this lesson is going to be nice and simple for the most part because we're going to have a lot of things that are going to be congruent, and that's very easy to work with. So last one, example 6 here. Now, I want you to notice something that's a little bit different here. How many angles do we have congruent in this picture? Well, we've got all 3. So what this guarantees, if I have 2 angles congruent, I've got 2 sides congruent. Here I have 3 angles congruent. That means all 3 sides are congruent. Nonetheless, this is going to be the exact same setup as last time, because if these sides are congruent, I can once again set them equal to each other. So very quickly, go ahead and solve for x. Well, 2x equals 12. Divide by 2. I got x equals 6, and that's it. So once more in the assignment, guys, which we'll be able to do in class, you're going to have a lot of different pictures, yeah? Depending on what angle is given, you attack the problem differently. Or if you're talking about sides, you attack the problem differently. So again, be aware, we did not have the exact same problem over and over again. So when you're doing the homework, keep an eye out for, okay, what does this picture give me? Does it give me an angle? Does it give me a base angle or not a base angle? So forth and so on, yeah? Because we're going to do them slightly different.